Planning Board meeting will come to order for Tuesday, January 23rd. I suspect most people are here for the town meeting articles. Can I just get a raise of hand? I would just want to make sure the majority of people, because are here for the zoning. Okay. Yeah, we're going to flip it and do that first and then do the other two items after then. So unless somebody would prefer not to, I just think most of the people here are for that reason, so we'll do it first. So Gene, if you could just recap where we are based on all of our reviews and so forth.
So this is the third public hearing for the zoning amendment articles, which are Articles 2, 4, and 5. Included in your packet was the spreadsheet, which I compiled at approximately 9:30 this morning. So those were public input comments through the website. I have taken the link down from the website going forward so that you've captured everybody to date. Additionally, there was one comment email submitted by Edward Lynch that you have in hard copy that was added to the packet later today. You have the draft warrant Article 4 with the edits that were discussed primarily at last meeting with some amendments since last meeting. The planning board report you have as well. So tonight, my understanding is you may vote on recommendations for the 3 warrant articles. They would be incorporated in the planning board report, and then we'd go to print with that for a town meeting.
Okay, would you recommend that we go, I know, I did notice that on this version, there are some red lines from the last time. Do you want to just quickly
walk through those?
Walk through those?
So I guess the most significant one was we agreed to define best management practices and add the word management back in to the decision. Well, not back in, but it was questioned whether it should be there at the last meeting. So best management practices has been added to 813.4 as a definition. The other edits remain that were in last, so on page 4. Page 4 edits are consistent with what they were last meeting.
That's in the red line version. Okay.
I'm sorry, so we're on the edited version?
Yeah, so it's like at the report.
Okay. Page 5 edits are consistent, and the word management is back in with best management practices. Same as page 6. Page 7 remains the same. And I think if you skip to page 11, the waiver requirement, there was some discussion about that, so that's been reworded a little bit, but the waiver is now consistent with what we discussed last meeting and site plan review. And the only reason that it's deleted and added in is the formatting was incorrect, so it shows as a red line and an add. Page 12 is consistent. Page 13, where applicable, has remained. Again, there was some discussion about that term at the last meeting, but our understanding is the board agreed to leave the word where applicable. 14 remains consistent with the word management and special permit granting authority. Same with 15, and I think that is it. 17, and that is it. So the one thing that you've discussed at the last couple meetings is that linkage of 15% of cultivation. I don't know if you want to further discuss that.
Can you come back, just what section is that again exactly?
Yep. It's in permitted uses.
We also talk about that best management practices.
Yep.
So I know the reason I think that it was put in like that was that that was wording that was used elsewhere in the state regulations. Is that right? Best management practices.
Right. So my understanding is the Attorney General's office referred town council to just use consistent language.
So I guess the question or issue I have is if we're using consistent language, that makes sense. But then if we're giving it our own definition, is there any real point to using consistent language if we're defining it different than it would be defined where it's in another location?
Yeah.
So, and again, I mean, I share Peter's kind of concern there that.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, Anton, I think the consistent language is, and Peter, you might be able to help me, was best practices, and then we added back in management, and we said to define it.
No,
No, I think we had originally, it was best practices.
correct.
It was added to as best management.
The word management was added.
Right.
And the concern I had with adding the word management is through the discussions with the board, I thought we were applying best practices to not only the management phase, but also the earlier design and construction phases. So best practices for design, best practices for construction, and best practices for management. And then when the word management was inserted, I'm not saying that everyone would read it that way, but if there was a contentious issue, that it might create ambiguity, which might cause it to be argued that, wait a minute, this does not hold us to any design or construction standard. It only holds us to management standards, and I wanted to avoid that. So if we do use the word management, which was added, I think we should be defining it as best management practices, the design, construction, and management practices of the industry that address the best practices as it relates to. But I think between the word "the" and practices, at least with respect to my concern, we should insert those qualifiers.
I would actually, so, I don't have, I would actually do it this way. I think, so just to,
Yeah,
the practices of the industry, including but not limited to
design, construction, and management.
And management that address the best practices that relates to them. I think if we add that, then I think that would satisfy our, the concerns that, and then we're not necessarily limited to those three if there's something else
Right.
that is all encompassing. And I think that's still, we can still then, if we could do that, then I think
I'd agree with
I
that.
co-sign
All
on
right,
that.
so can I just confirm, after industry, you have a comma, including but not limited to, comma, and the rest of the sentence remains?
The practices of the practices of the industry, comma, including but not limited to,
Design, construction, and
semicolon,
management.
yeah, semicolon.
Design,
Colon.
construction,
Design, construction, and management, comma, that address the best practices as it relates to a marijuana facility
okay.
meeting the requirements of this bylaw.
On that 50% thing, how does it sound if at the end of it,
John, this is page 4.
page 4,
Page
yeah,
4.
item number 5, so it says, any special permit granted for an AMU for marijuana cultivation shall reserve 50% of the gross floor area dedicated to cultivation for marijuana research facility, and such space shall not be used for any other purpose. What I don't want to have happen is that it's being leased for some other completely independent use as part of this.
Okay.
And the only other thing I could say is, should we put a time limit on when the 15% has to come into actual use? That's probably the part that I struggled with, but I think maybe we put that in our decision.
Special permit, probably.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think, because I think we could get a sense from whatever applicant is applying of, they could give us a commitment of when that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So is there something that could be put in the text here that doesn't set the time limit, but notes that the time frame for which this must be accomplished will be noted in the, is there some sort of a,
Well, in the, let's see, I thought there was something that is, the site plan details, is there a section of the site plan detail that includes a schedule?
The construction management schedule.
So, where is that, which item is that?
On page 7, item 8,
Okay.
at the end of 1813.9.
It's 13.
Yes.
That first sentence seems to cover it. It says a plan which sets out the sequence and dates of all aspects of the project.
Where's that?
It's on page 7, number 8, so if you're still on the red line,
Yeah,
number 8 at the top, it says construction management plan, that first sentence.
yeah, that's fine. I think that's what we wanted, yeah.
I think that covers it.
Is there, does it, in that number 8 is dedicated to the construction portion of the management plan? I mean, should it be a separate sort of implementation management plan that speaks to when the 15%?
Well, why don't we call it construction and implementation management plan?
That would do it.
And
Yeah, because it says, like Jen said, it says that all sequence dates of all aspects, not just limited to
Yeah.
construction, so.
I just have one other point on that language. So it is, except that any special permit issued for an AMU for marijuana cultivation shall reserve 15% of the gross floor area dedicated to cultivation for marijuana research. So if you take that quite literally, some people are interpreting that to mean within that, middle square of the building where they intend to have cultivation at 1600 Osgood, so that they would reserve space within that footprint as opposed to the office area up front, which I think is building 20.
it's really the, yeah, the
Is building
intent.
20, if I remember right, up front. That's up to the board.
Yeah, let us see if we can resolve it among ourselves, please.
So I'd be concerned to just refer
Page
to
4.
as the site, but
Page 4, number 5.
number 5. So it says of the gross floor area dedicated to cultivation, and so my
So I think
concern,
the ambiguity here might be that in order to calculate the number of square feet that has to be dedicated, you take the gross floor area that's under cultivation, 15% of that. But then the ambiguity is, where must that 15% R&D space be located? Does this language mean that it's 15% located on the growing floor? Or does it mean that it's 15% of the growing floor located somewhere on the property, but not the growing floor? That's the issue, right?
Right, well, I mean, logically, it would be the latter. I mean, implicit would be the latter, so if you need to clarify it.
I think it needs to be clarified, because people
Yeah.
are interpreting that different. So
Yeah, no, I mean, I
it does
think
read
it-
within the gross space.
It should be, it's more, whatever the gross space is, you have to add 15% on.
So reserve a
Should we just take out?
amount, an area equal to
Yeah.
15% of the gross floor area.
Yeah.
That would.
Okay.
At least equal to, you can, if you want to do more than
Yep.
15%, you can.
And that doesn't specify within the cultivation space.
Right,
Yeah.
shall reserve,
And I
An area
think-
of at least
I think
15%.
At least is a good addition.
At least
Yeah.
equal to 15% of the gross floor area dedicated to cultivation. So I think that's all
Yeah,
set.
okay, good,
Because the intent was the office area. I mean, we've heard that all along.
okay. So right now, the planning board report, Jean,
Yep,
is that, did you give us that?
yes, you have a copy of that. And essentially, as it stands now, it's really just a cut and paste from the warrant articles. That should be it done.
does this report usually have commentary, or what is the design, what is the purpose of the report?
It does not typically have commentary, so it just has your vote, whether favorable, unfavorable, no action, or to be made at town meeting.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it can't have commentary, so if you wanted to add something in, it can be. The minutes typically reflect this whole planning board report, and then we add the discussion within each article in the minutes. But that's up to you.
The minutes of
The meeting itself,
the special town meeting,
this meeting.
of this meeting?
Yeah, so we really cut and paste this, the planning board report, and then we add, as you discuss each article, in the minutes.
Well, how about our discussion about to introduce more clarity in the explanation?
That you can edit this to reflect that, if you'd like.
So I would like to see in the explanation something along the lines of what the chairman had said at a previous meeting, which I thought was very plain language. A yes vote means, a no vote means.
But we also have to take I think we will be taking a position on each of these articles as well. So is it just an explanatory of what it means, or is there also a place to say, okay, yes, we're voting either unfavorable or favorable, but it seems to me with something this kind of a special town meeting just for this, it may be worthwhile to have a short paragraph of why we're favorable or unfavorable to a particular article with some.
I'm happy to also have something like that.
I think that would be good. I mean, I think that, obviously, when do we have to have that by? Do we have to have that now? I mean, because,
So we have to make 2,500 copies between now and Tuesday. It would be nice if we could post this on the website prior to town meeting. So I intended on having it tomorrow,
okay,
ideally, but it's
okay.
prior to this discussion. I didn't.
Well, let's, put it aside, because I believe we can write it. It's just, it'll be slightly awkward about the process at which we put it together and finalize it, but we can come back to that.
So typically, we send this outside to print. I would anticipate that I'm going to have it printed locally and make sure that we have as many as the warrant article, because the motion for this article will be as depicted on the screen and in the planning board report. So I do want to make sure that if we can get it on the website, we do so, and if we can, we make sure we have as many copies as we do for the warrant.
Okay,
So,
okay. So why don't we, if there's no other comments from the board, open it to the public for any further comments, questions, clarifications, confusions, or whatever. So if anybody would like to stand up and speak, feel free to do so.
On all articles?
On all articles. Yes. So there's nobody who would like to speak. So, okay. Then I think at this point, we had said previously that we were going to make our recommendations this evening. And we could take them in whatever order. We can have a discussion about them. So I don't know, maybe if, I'll leave it to each member of the board to make a few remarks about where they're thinking, where their view is, and we can go from there.
You want to do each article individually?
Well, I think in the end, we have to vote on each article individually, but in terms of comments, I think we can address them holistically, because, kind of like if you vote for one, you're opposed to the other.
Okay, and so I guess I'll start since I'm
Yeah.
down here.
Well, you have the jacket on your chin.
I do,
Yeah.
I do, I'm bold.
Yeah,
So I think that we have worked very long and very hard to come up with a really workable, usable bylaw. We have to zone for commercial marijuana. We have to. If we don't zone for it, it's pretty much the Wild West and we don't have regulations. So we need to put zoning in somewhere in town. The problem with, and that's the exact reason we did a moratorium last year, was so that we could have time to do that. I know some people have said that this is rushed. I don't necessarily agree with the term rush, but it was faster than we would have liked. But I don't think that means that we don't have a really, really good bylaw that we can vote forward at the special town meeting. Would have preferred to have more time to have more regulations in place, to see everything that's come down, maybe to have some other towns. But in the end, we've done our homework, we've done our work here, and I am very much in favor of the Articles 4 and 5, our bylaw that we've drafted, as well as the zoning map. I think I'm satisfied that the information that we've gotten on our own, that we've gotten from experts, that we have reviewed from the 1600 Osgood, that we've done enough work on that to craft a zoning bylaw that would allow someone to apply for a special permit and then go through the really rigorous steps that we have set forward, which frankly, in looking at the CCC regulations, our special permit might be even more rigorous than that, though probably less expensive. So I'm happy with what we've done, and I would vote favorably on that and unfavorably on pretty much anything else.
So, I agree. I've heard the concerns of people that this process has been rushed, and I think the part of the process that may be susceptible to being rushed is this special town meeting piece. I don't think it's our work. I've been on this board since June, and I think almost every single meeting we've sat and we've thought and talked and discussed and worked really hard on the draft bylaw, and I personally approached it in a way that even if it is not this particular proponent who comes in, would I feel comfortable that we sitting here in these chairs have enough guidelines and guidance to make sure that anything that comes into town, even if it isn't this particular project, is going to be something that's good for our town? And do we have the ability to make that judgment and that decision and the guidelines to help us focus on the issues that I heard at the last town meeting that were of concern to the citizens in our town, and the things that concerned me when I think about citing a commercial marijuana facility in our town. And I think we've done our diligence. I feel like this covers the water and is very protective for the town. And so, like Etan, I am in favor of Articles 4 and 5, so our draft bylaw and the map, and I'm not in favor of Article 2.
Darren?
I think the conclusion that Etan and Jen reached is my conclusion as well. I really saw this whole process over the last few months as people really struggling with frankly, the fear of marijuana, and that's led to the development of our bylaw. It's also led to this citizen petition. To address that fear, I think Article 4 is a very happy medium. It addresses that people are a bit trepidatious about this, given that we've been told this material, this plant, it's very bad for 50, 60 years. But this is a happy medium that I think addresses that trepidation in the community, some of the unknowns that I think Peter has really gone out of his way to try to ferret out in terms of odor control, water usage, the effect on our community's environment. So in that sense, Articles 4 and 5, I am prepared tonight to recommend favorable action, and I would recommend unfavorable action on Article 2 if we vote on that this evening.
Okay. Peter?
So I do agree with the other members of the board that we spent quite a bit of time working on the bylaw, and certainly have a much, I think, better prepared bylaw than what the town saw in the spring. However, I do feel that it is nonetheless rushed in two important respects, which in my view are fatal. And those two respects are, first, rushed in terms of dramatically limiting our ability to outreach to the town and the citizens in a way that gives us a balanced view. We have proponents who are well-funded, who I think are doing a tremendously effective job of advocacy. And the funding and full-time expertise that's devoted to that allows the proponent side of the issue to be quite effective as an advocacy measure. But on the other side of the coin, getting the word out to the town about what this means in all respects, good things, bad things, if there are any, it takes longer because it is not well funded. And by accelerating the town meeting to the end of January instead of its regular time, I believe that that is a fatal flaw because it does not provide time for sufficient outreach to the citizens for those who may not be advocates. And I think it's unfair to the town, unfair to those citizens, and certainly runs counter to what my hopes had been. The second area that I think it is rushed in a manner that is potentially fatal is that we are well in advance of the state regulations. Now, we've spent time consulting and inquiring and trying to adapt to what we think those might be, but we don't know. I think if we had the opportunity to go to a regular town meeting, it might bring us to the point in the process where we might be close enough to really see and understand the shape of those state regulations. But we can't do that now, and so in terms of process, I think that's a second fatal flaw in terms of being rushed. We've heard quite a bit of feedback, particularly recently, asking, I think in very thoughtful ways, why the planning board took this path instead of another path. And for me, at least, I can't speak for the whole board, but for me, the sense was that, given the changes in the law, that if the town would be approached by a developer to develop a marijuana cultivation facility or other uses of marijuana, that the town ought to be prepared with a well-thought-out bylaw to give the town and the citizens some degree of control over how this might be developed in our community. And I think in the spring, it was a very difficult circumstance to see the opposite example, where we had something that was very rushed, even at the town meeting, covered with red line, and a lot of unanswered questions. But what that means is that, from my perspective, that this board should do its homework on behalf of the town to be ready in the event that the town decided this use was appropriate. And so for me, my work on the board is not an endorsement or advocacy of this use, but rather it is doing our homework as your volunteers to be ready in case the town decided this was appropriate. And so I'm left with some very substantial concerns. The town voted in the general election against it, and then last town meeting, and here I want to be careful because in the past I've said the town voted against it a second time. But I think people have fairly noted that I should be more careful how I say that. The town voted more than half of the people, but short of the required 2/3 majority. So to me, the town voted against it, but it's a fair point that it was more than half of the town that voted for it. But I worry that at a special town meeting called in the dead of winter, we will have what in effect is a partial town meeting, which is the third flaw. So for those reasons, I cannot support Article 4 and 5, and I think I've explained why. Chris?
I'm also new, as Jen said, and we have spent every meeting discussing this issue since I've been here, and that's been since July. And I've watched, really, the five of you wrestle with this mightily. And given my position, it's a little bit outside the window looking in, but I gotta say, I'm really impressed, very impressed, each and every one of you. the detail, the thoughtfulness, the line by line, how do we protect the town, how do we protect our water, how do we protect for odor, every aspect of it. So personally, as this bylaw is written, I don't see that it's rushed. I really, really don't. I do think that it is unfortunate that we had a shorter amount of time to do these public hearings. I think it was difficult for us. I think it was difficult for the public. It would have been nicer to have a longer time to have the public hearing and to have some of those things vetted. So I'm with you on that. Unfortunately, those circumstances were not something that we had anything to do with. We couldn't prevent that from happening. But I don't think that I could call this rushed. I think that we are well protected. I think it's well written. So I'm not going to belabor it because I agree with all of your points and I appreciate your hard work, really, and all of you for your late nights. So I would vote yes on 4 and 5, and I would reject 2.
Yes, but just for the record, you can't officially
That is
vote,
right. I cannot.
so,
I'm
yeah.
expressing my personal vote, which
Yes.
will be my own.
Fair enough. Good, great, thank you. I guess my perspective is similar to many of the points that Peter raised. I think that if we're going to have a large-scale marijuana cultivation facility, I believe we did the best possible job we could, and I think it's a very sound, thorough, detailed effort. But the fundamental issue here, and the core of this, is do we believe that a large-scale marijuana cultivation facility at this time is best for the town of North Andover? And on that, I'm not sold. I think that there's very significant potential downside risk associated with it. I think it could have a major impact on the brand and the reputation and the quality of life of North Andover. If this doesn't succeed, people say, well, look at all the money we're going to get. There's no guarantee that we're going to get large sums of money. There's no agreement in place to ensure that the town will get a tax revenue of X. There's been no guarantee or commitment or anything that made. Granted, the host community agreement comes further down the road, but there's no assurance and certainty that we're going to get tax revenue of X dollars associated with this project. And there's no assurance that 5 to 10 years down the road, as the equipment in this property depreciates, the tax burden associated with that increase in value gets flipped over to the taxpayers, not to the proponents of this facility. And there's a lot of other risks associated with this failing. One is the state environment is uncertain, as Peter mentioned. The federal environment is uncertain, as we all know. We don't know what's going to happen for sure. There's no certainty from an economics perspective that a project like this will work. There has been no large-scale cultivation facility of this type built anywhere in the world. The mere technology of it might not work. There's large tomato growing facilities up in Maine, and their entire crop got wiped out 2 or 3 years ago because of blight. Major financial risk. And so we just don't know. And in my view, the benefits of a speculative amount of money that the town might get more than offset by what I think is going to be a major hit to the reputation of the town and to the property values of town. And it's not something that I'm willing to countenance right now. I think the applicants for the proposed project have been very good. They've worked very hard with us. They've been very professional. But in the end, it's our decision as a town whether we want this use. And this is not a use that I think from a public policy viewpoint makes sense. So I'm planning on voting against the Articles 4 and 5. So, any other comments?
Just a couple of comments on what you and what Peter said. So, to me, John, that makes sense in terms of potentially voting for in favor of Article 2, but not necessarily against Articles 4 and 5. Because it seems if you are against the use, then banning the use makes sense, but let's assume the vote, Article 2 goes first, right? And that passes, then, or doesn't pass, then you're gonna have the use. So the question is, what do you do with it and how do you regulate it? And it seems if you're gonna have it, if the town votes to have it, then you're better off with the bylaw we drafted than something else.
Well, right, but what you could do is, let's hypothetically say none of them pass, everything washes out. You can come back at the regular town meeting, and you could put a bunch of different things in, but you could limit the size to a modest size.
I don't know
To
that-
25,000 square feet or something like that.
I don't know that you could with the 2-year rule, whether that would be substantially different. I don't know that you
Well,
could.
then we would have nothing.
We would have no regulations in place, which would mean that we have no zoning for it,
I'm not sure.
which I'm not
I agree
sure
with
what that means.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that
I
mean-
agree with that. But I think you could come back with something that, at the regular town meeting, that cleans everything up, that carries us forward.
I just wouldn't be so certain that you can. That, for me, that's an open question, whether you could or not, and I frankly wouldn't be in a hurry to take that risk.
So I think you asked a good question. But part of my reaction to that is, I think, I mean, obviously, as everyone said, we've spent a lot of time focused on this. I think we have a pretty good sense of what's in it, and what's going on. And then you have members of the town who are coming to meetings, being informed, and I'm sure you have some watching on television or looking at minutes or online. I'm sure they're out there. But I also think that there is a proportion of residents who come to town meeting who have not had the luxury to study the issues on the warrant. And one of the things that they do, one of the things that I have done at town meetings, is I look at the recommendations. Oh, favorable action. Well, I didn't have a chance to study this, and I can see it's a favorable action, and I know those people have devoted time. I think there's a real risk of those members of the community that have not had the luxury to focus on the issue conflating a favorable recommendation as not only saying, we have done our due diligence in drafting a bylaw in the event you, the town, support this use, but conflating it instead with, oh, the board agrees with this use. And under these conditions, for the reasons I've said, I can't do that. And I think that's a very real risk.
So any other thoughts? So if none, would somebody like to make a motion on Article 4?
Sure, I would make a motion that the board vote favorable action on Article 4.
Procedurally, do we have to close the public hearing
Oh,
first?
that's a good point.
That's a good point.
No?
So typically you vote, and then right before town meeting is when you close the public hearing.
Okay,
So
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just saying
Okay,
that
let's
that's
keep
been
it
the
open
past.
just in case something else comes
Which
up.
leads me to
Yeah.
another question on that, and you can decide whether you want to start it at 6 or 6:30. Historically, it's been 6:30, but you may want to start that one at 6.
This might be a better idea to start early, yeah.
Yeah, so
okay.
I just don't want to
So-
get that point. And when you do make your motion, if you are motioning as amended, then make
Yes.
sure you include that.
Thank
Okay.
you. So, restart?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I'll make a motion to vote favorable action on Article 4 for the special town meeting warrant January 30th, 2018, as amended tonight, and including the amendments that were in our red line version for tonight's meeting of January 23rd.
As
Second.
As amended on the
right.
floor tonight.
Okay.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye and raise their hands.
Aye.
And those opposed? So the recommendation is favorable, 3-2.
Yep.
So can we get a motion on 5?
I would make a motion to approve Article 5. There are no amendments, is that correct, Jean?
Right.
Okay. I would make a motion to approve Article 5 for the special town meeting, January 30th, 2018.
So recommend favorable action.
Yes, favorable action.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So the recommendation carries 3-2. So if we can go now back to number 2.
I'd like to make a motion on Article 2 to be presented at the special town meeting on January 30th, 2018. I'd like to recommend unfavorable action on that article.
Okay. Motion made. Do we hear a second?
A second.
Do we need any further discussion? You might want to clarify it, because I think,
Just one point, so everyone knows, Article 2 bans all types of marijuana establishments, commercial, marijuana cultivators, independent testing laboratories, product manufacturers, retailers within the town. Non-medical. I'm not sure it actually says that, but I know that it says that in the heading, It's just a one-page document, but it does say non-medical. I think that is clearly the intention.
It says it under paragraph 1.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So it does say non-medical marijuana establishments. I think that if, John, your concern is a major facility, that's not necessarily, that's partially answered by this, but not all the way answered like this. Peter, I'm not sure if this addresses, if voting favorable or unfavorable really addresses your concerns on this, though I think your conflation concern would still
Well,
prove.
not only that, but under the time constraints that we're under, I feel like my options are limited.
I'd agree. Just wanted to put that out there.
So I might have a different view if we have the time to really outreach to the town and really assure ourselves that not only the advocates are aware, but also those who aren't sure or are not advocates, then I might have a different view.
But if you vote favorable on this, that means that for all intents and purposes, this is the law of the land, that this
Right.
issue is done.
Right.
Regardless.
Right.
But if it was unfavorable and and Articles 4 and 5 also didn't pass.
Right.
From, I think, what you said, and I'm not sure I agree, then we're at a clean slate and kind of starting over. This isn't starting over. This is ending the conversation the other way.
Right.
no, it is, but I think to Peter's point is, these are the cards we're dealt. I'll mix my metaphors all over the place, at this point in time. I mean, we are where we are. This is a choice we have. I think Peter's saying that if it were April, it might be a different choice.
Okay. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree, but.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So the motion made, and we have a second to recommend unfavorable action on Article 2. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? So the motion carries 3-2. So do we have anything else?
As far as the explanation, do you want to discuss
I
incorporating
think,
something in the report?
I think the explanations, maybe the way to do it is, I view it as sort of in two parts. One is there may be a short couple of sentences that say, if you approve this, this is what you approve. Because we said, sort of a neutral sort of thing. This is the intent of what it is, and this is what it will allow, and so forth. Just a paragraph of explanation. And then what I would say is, maybe one of the three, you would want to write a paragraph or two saying why you think it makes sense. And then, Peter and or I could write a paragraph or two why we don't think it makes sense. And that's what I think that's probably the best way to do it. When do you need it by?
I would appreciate it tomorrow, if you can do
Okay.
it.
Why don't we,
What I think that we should do procedurally then is vote to allow one person to do that, basically summarizing the positions that have been stated here today. I think it really should summarize what was said today and not
Okay.
go outside of that.
I think that's fair, yeah, within the bounds of the discussion today. Would you like, is that the motion to that effect?
Yes. So I would make a motion to allow a member of the three persons who voted in favor of Articles 4 and 5 and against an unfavorable action on Article 2 to write a majority report, one or two paragraph about the reasonings, and the same for the two in the minority to put a paragraph. So that's the motion. I would say I don't see it as advocacy necessarily, but just more just a summary of the position.
Yeah,
That's a very good point,
yeah.
yeah.
Do you want
Okay.
to limit the size of the paragraphs?
I think we're talking,
I mean, literally, a paragraph as opposed to a page? How many
Oh.
sentences? Three
Well, when we
sentences,
say
four sentences?
paragraph, I'm thinking sort of like that,
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of sort of like that.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we said
Yeah.
1 or 2 paragraphs, right?
correct,
Does that make sense?
yes.
Is it per each article? Is that how we're doing, is that how it
I
would
mean, I
go,
think-
like one for under each?
Yeah,
Or is it at the beginning about the whole thing, how?
I would just say one, I mean, I think I would say one for each. I mean, well, the zoning map, I don't think really needs.
Yeah, it doesn't need
Yeah.
it,
It just-
and frankly, what you're doing is you're counterpointing on the two anyway, so, yeah, okay. So,
So-
okay, so your motion is to do that. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
And so that's to be incorporated within the written report.
That's to be incorporated within the written report, yeah. And if we could do that midday tomorrow, yeah. So, okay.
Is that just on Article 4?
And
Well, it's
Two
4
and
and
four.
2,
Two
yeah,
as well.
2 and 4, yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay,
I think that's it on that.
so we're back to regular business. So Princeton Properties, the two public hearings for the modifications of the site plan review.
The agenda lists 122 Foster Street first, but I don't think the applicant's here, so if you want to jump to Princeton, if there's nobody in the audience.
Oh, okay,
Choice.
yeah, we'll do Princeton first.
Okay.
Jeff Brown, Preston Properties.
Okay, so for this application, the hearing was opened at the last meeting. You directed me to draft 2 modification decisions, one for each applicant, which are Princeton Property Development and Fajetta Development, for the project that was permitted in December of 16 at 1210 Osgood Street. It's a mixed-use development comprised of a residential component as well as commercial. So what I've done is drafted the modifications using the existing permit, and I kept it really intact because, as you can see, there's a significant amount of conditions, most of which have not been met yet. So the project's still in its infancy in terms of before Mass DOT to get their permits, and then once that is finalized, they'll progress to a lot of these conditions. So although there was minor changes on the findings of facts number 11 for the stormwater component, I also added it in as an amended finding of fact, and then really built from there in terms of the revised site plans related to this project. So the changes in each are really identical, but each permit was its own individual permit.
But you kept most of what was already there, right? Yeah.
Almost in its entirety. I just
Okay.
laid in what the modification is on top of what the original permit was.
Okay. We've kept the hearing open. Is there any reason to keep it open further?
I have no reason, so all reviews were in. Conservation has drafted their amended order of conditions. I think their meeting's tomorrow night. So I've been in sync with Jen in terms of reviewing these plans and making sure she has everything she needs as well.
Okay.
So the town engineer, if you recall, at the last meeting, reviewed the grading changes, commented on the slope at 8% on the northern entranceway, would not recommend it be any higher, but it has remained at 8%.
Okay.
So
Okay. Any questions from the board before we close, or?
I just want to thank you for, I know you guys didn't really want to go through the full modification process, but I think it was worthwhile to get a real solid finished project, so thank you for that.
So, let's close both of them, but we'll vote separately?
Okay. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on 1210 Osgood Street, both Princeton Development LLC and Forgetta Development LLC.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. All in favor to close the public hearing on the 2 public hearings? Aye. Okay. So, does it matter which one we go through
it's
first?
not to me.
Okay.
Just let me know which one you are.
Let's do Princeton first.
For Princeton, I would point out condition 34 is a really important condition because it ties in all the other special permits that were related to this site. And so there's conditions in all of them that this is kind of the master permit, and all conditions need to be met in those conditions as well. So when you get to number 34, that was the intent of that.
So are there still proposed traffic improvements that are going to happen?
The traffic
Yeah.
listed, so that's from the original permit?
That's from the original, that's what I was
yeah,
asking. I
yep.
didn't know if that was from the original or new.
Really, on the finding of facts, the only material change is number 11,
Okay,
which is the stormwater component.
okay,
And then it's also listed in the amended finding of facts. I relisted it there.
okay, thank you.
There are traffic improvements, but they haven't changed since the original approval. We're just in the Department of Transportation process to get them to approve that design.
Okay,
Yeah, so there's a light being added, there's lanes being added, turning lanes and whatnot. So there's significant Route 125 improvements associated with this project.
In part of that, based on the MassWorks grant, is now expanded into sidewalks, both southerly and northerly. So now DEP's DOT is reviewing a much larger scale of a project than was originally planned when we were just doing the traffic improvements relative to our development.
And finding of fact 5, your parenthetical, do you mean to keep that in here? What you have in bold and
Yes,
parens?
you asked the same question when I did it the first time. I don't want to miss it. That's really important.
Okay,
So it, that is the same as it existed in the first permit.
oh, okay.
I just want to make sure when it comes time
Yeah.
to check these things off, that we
Yeah.
tie it back to those findings of facts.
We ever gone over 100 conditions?
I think this is the most. I have never seen one over 100.
a new bond or a change in the bond amount or
No,
just as is?
it's the same project essentially, just
Okay.
different stormwater design. And it's 40,000 for each project, so.
That's- No, I think
pretty
that's appropriate, I
substantial. Yeah,
just want to know.
because they haven't begun construction, it's not like they're taking something up and putting something in. It's
Right.
So at the bottom of page 5,
the what?
bottom of page 5.
Yep, good. I thought you said the bond amount.
24C, the C is capitalized, should be
Okay.
lowercase. I'm just kidding,
Thank
Gene.
you, Peter.
I'm just kidding.
What a catch.
Just kidding, Gene.
That was a
In every
Dave,
joke,
Wow.
there's a little truth. I said in every joke, there's a little truth.
yeah. That was a Dave Kellogg,
Oh,
catch,
God.
yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so make sure you add as amended to your motion, okay?
I know, we wanted to do that, we had to
Thanks.
find something.
Oh, I
now.
actually have it in
Yeah.
there.
They're the same?
Substantively, yes, but
Different name?
the numberings, there might be, it's not 101 in each, so
Okay.
there was a condition or two that was not applicable in the commercial development, if I remember correct.
Okay.
And there was a finding of fact added, working with Gene, that does recognize that the board did find this to be a substantial change and that we did go through the 8.3.8 process to connect this into the amendment.
Right, yep. Okay, is everybody through on the Princeton one? Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve the application for modification to the site plan review, multifamily housing and reduction in parking special permit 1210 Osgood Street, Princeton Development LLC.
Okay, motion made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'm giving it to Jen.
Okay, good, yeah, she was a little quicker. All in favor? Aye. Okay. On to the other one. I don't know if everybody read the other one. It's basically clones the other one, so.
Substantively, it's the same amended conditions and findings.
Oh, the C's correct in this one, though.
Thanks, John.
I think we did have one time that we approved it without amendments.
Must have been mine.
We do have 100 on this one. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion on the Forgetta modification special permit? A reduction in parking special permit, yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the application for modification of the site plan review and reduction in parking special permit for 1210 Osgood Street for Jetta Development LLC.
Yep, okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Peter? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
and I'd specifically like to thank Jean. This has been a monumental task in drafting, and she's been great to work with, so it's been a pleasure to work with Jean, and glad we could get this done, and we're looking forward to our project.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're on to Varsity Wireless.
Yes.
Can you, I know this was a tough one to write because it's a negative and you have to put a lot of careful thought in it. Can you, what I'd like you to do is maybe make a few general comments about the process you followed and then maybe take us through some of the specifics so we understand step by step what you did.
So Crafton, really setting it up in terms of the denial, it specifies what the application was for, which is the 130 plus 5 feet. The 3 motions, though, were on the reduction options. On the October 27th plan set, they did revise their plan set to indicate a 115-foot tower. And so your last motion was on the 115-foot tower.
Yeah.
The,
So,
Go ahead.
I emailed Gene about this after reading the decision. It might make sense to me just to vote on the 130 as well, just because that is actually what their application states.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's form over substance.
Yeah.
If we all say no to 110, I think we're saying no to 130, but
Yeah.
I think just as a matter of practice, it might be best just to vote on the 130 as well and just add that to the decision.
so I agree. The next morning, I went to town council, and I'm like, what the application was, and the motion was as proposed, and it was proposed at the time at 115, but belt and suspenders, you might want to vote on the
Okay,
130. She
why don't
wasn't
we do
overly
that,
concerned
why
with
don't
it.
we do
but-
that right now?
Okay.
Would you like to make a motion? to
Sure,
that
and I think
effect?
it should be motion, it should be second, and we should take a full vote on it.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so I'd make a motion to approve the wireless facility special permit for cell tower 122 Foster Street at the height of 130 feet, with 135 being the top, as proposed in the original application.
So you're making an affirmative motion?
Yes, it's an affirmative
Okay,
motion.
okay.
All the other ones were affirmative motions as
Okay.
well.
So, okay. So, okay, motion made affirmatively and seconded. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Okay, so it's 5-0 opposed.
Okay.
And then if we could add that to the decision, just, I think it would just
As the
flow in
fo-
the same. in
As the
same-
fourth motion.
Correct.
Yes. So then it was really deciphering kind of the sense of the board. And the first two findings are really important. So essentially, the second finding, that it's inadequate coverage does not constitute a significant gap. I think we all acknowledge that there was a gap. However, I believe the sense of the board was it wasn't significant, and then it details as to why. The other big piece was, although there was a gap, that what they demonstrated did not cover the gap in its entirety, so there was only a portion of the gap. And then the other crux of the decision really is the alternative analysis and whether it was vetted to the degree the board was satisfied with. So granted, it was late in the process, but the alternative for the rear of the lot really was exposed in the last hearing. The applicant was given the option to pursue that. They did not want to pursue it. There was visual presentation made by our consultant that I weighed, and I had the sense that the board weighed required a little bit more diligence. And so that.
Even before that, we had to depend on our consultants to vet alternative sites in previous meetings.
Yeah.
Right.
That was really the basis of my decision in its entirety, is that it was the applicant's honest to vet those sites and say, this one isn't appropriate because of these reasons, this one isn't appropriate because of these reasons, and I just always felt that it was this site, and then they found other, they made up the reasons as they went along as to why other sites weren't appropriate.
Yeah. And I believe the terminology is hearsay. So when they responded to the rear of the lot, it was really just conversational. We think this, we think that, and there wasn't really anything on the record to say it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
The balloon test wasn't done. So at a high level, I think the real crux of, was it a significant gap, and was the alternative analysis pursued to the degree that the board was satisfied with. So, but I would encourage you to read all of them, and then the rest of it is really just calling out by bylaw specification, whether it was met or not met.
Yeah.
So. And I did reach out to our consultant to give input on these findings of facts, and town council did review it, although she did leave for vacation today, so I will say she reviewed it and did submit comments. Had she had more time, I think she may have spent more time on it, but I'm confident that the consultant, who's very experienced in certainly defending decisions in court from what we've read, he did participate in the decision writing.
So you basically, now I see sort of what you did, is you took the provisions of the bylaw and then you put the findings of fact
Yep, built it
related
right
to
into
that.
it. Again, the sense of the board was it came back to the bylaw, and did they meet it? And certain board members really specified and read right from the bylaw in that last meeting and spoke to whether they agreed or disagreed whether it met that requirement. I am open to any modification that you have, to be
Well,
honest.
personally, for me, it was location. I actually thought, and maybe with our consultant's help, I thought, I came to the conclusion there was a significant gap, but I'm not sure how everybody else feels on that point, whether, I'm fine keeping it in if everybody else thought that point about the gap not being a gap or not significant.
Well, I thought you handled it in a very nice way where you tied the threads together. I think that, I feel that was a strong way of
I
doing
mean,
it.
I don't think I felt that way, but I think a majority of the board expressed that opinion.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd say is that I might like to see something that, for me, where it failed was in the purposes of the bylaw, in terms of it didn't meet all of the purposes in terms of aesthetics and minimizing impacts. And that's why I voted for it at a lower height, because I thought it would, but at the higher height, I didn't think that it did. And so I think we could all agree that it failed to minimize impacts on the
Yeah, I mean,
community.
if you
I'm
look.
not sure
at-
if that,
Yeah, at
didn't see
number
that.
32, my feeling is
I didn't get
that addresses that partly, but I think it should be a much more emphatic sort of thing, because it's a, it's, the fact that it's a historical rural neighborhood, a farming area, that there's a lot of history there, and this just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not just that it's a visual nuisance, it's, you know, it's a disaster, is what it is. And I think, you know, that's one thing, and
So maybe we could, actually, it looks like number 34 kind of talks about it a little bit. Proposed facilities not in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the bylaw, but I agree, John, maybe we could,
and yeah, maybe expand
wanna
32 and
flesh that out.
34,
Okay.
both of those, I would do a little bit. One other thing, Peter, I know you in the meeting, and I think this is one it's a little bit ambiguous, but I think it's fair to say that they did not present any compelling evidence to demonstrate that there wouldn't be an impact on property values from a facility that big. And I don't know if we want to put that in there or not. I mean, that's sometimes, you know, it's kind of like, that's hearsay of its own, I suppose.
Well,
I would say
my
both.
view of that is that they presented a report, but in my view, the report was not responsive to the question.
Yeah.
I will say that the opponents also submitted a lot of different data regarding valuations, and
but
I think
So,
the sense
but-
of the board was, yeah, we hear it, but can you rely
Okay.
on
We
it?
couldn't put faith in either.
Right.
No, right, okay,
Exactly.
fair enough. That's
no,
fine.
but to that point is, if you just wash away both of those and say neither of them is satisfying, we still don't have satisfactory evidence of the effect on property values.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we could put that, there was not satisfactory evidence as to the effect, one, good or bad,
Right.
on property values.
Yeah.
We did have two real estate professionals who, you know, happened to also be living in that area, but they both commented that, actually, only one of them lived in that area, but commented that, you know, the report they presented was not responsive. But I agree with your approach.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, if we beef up 32 and 34, I think we'll be in pretty good shape there.
So, Gene, can I ask you a question about page 5? At the top, under 18,
Yeah.
so, after 18, 4, design standards, and then there's section A, and then the ... You've left out Roman numeral 1, which is camouflage by existing buildings or structures, and I assume that's been left out because it's not applicable?
That's-
That you purposely
right,
left that out?
yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
And I will note that we received a appeal notice today that the zoning board of appeals decision has been appealed. So,
Oh, it has been?
yes. And it's, I think.
By whom?
If you don't have a hard copy, I did put it in the packet. Attorney Caffrey, I believe. Sorry, Kenneth Lindar, trustee of Foster Street Realty Trust, is the plaintiff, Varsity Wireless Investors, and Ellen Mack, and then names the zoning board of appeals as defendants. So, at your last hearing, I believe Attorney Caffrey
Right.
represented this Kenneth Lindar.
Probably worth mentioning, right? Is that something appropriate to mention?
In our, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Even
I
after we made our votes.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
just find it interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I guess if someone is worried that there'll be a appeal of this decision, then they might as well perfect their rights there, because if they don't, then,
Well, right, yeah,
so.
yeah,
It's just
exactly,
like-
yeah.
It lives
So
another
you
day.
guys, let's see here, and you guys, since you're attorneys, you know you get stuff in the mail, but have you been on the board long enough to get like a legal notice?
No,
Oh.
no, I have not.
Okay.
I feel like it's a warning.
Join the club, yeah.
Yes, if we ever get appealed. just
Yeah, if you get appealed, you
personal.
get, you get a legal notice, yeah. So, okay.
And
Anything?
as far as attachment A, I just documented what I thought was in the record that you based your decision on. So it's not,
Yeah.
about his list, it's not every single document in the record, but it's the ones I
That's-
felt may or may
Yeah,
not come into play.
that's good.
We
That's
get-
good, I like that.
Actually, it just reminded me of a point that we raised at the very start of this journey, which was, why for a cell tower is the abutters list limited to 300 feet? And I think at the time you said that we would make a correction to that
No,
and
it's
expand it.
statutorily, for a special permit, that's the notification. And so unless you want to make a bylaw amendment, and I don't even know that that would hold up, to be honest. 'Cause
I guess I recalled a different outcome, but I'm not challenging what
Yeah.
you're saying. Because the discussion at the time was these towers are so tall,
Yeah.
no matter where they are, it affects people beyond 300 feet.
And I remember discussing it with town council, and I can bring it up again, but I believe that your bylaw would then conflict with the statutory requirement of 300 feet.
But I think we may be able, I don't think we could do something that is more, like it's 300 feet. I don't think we could make a bylaw that's at 100
Less,
feet.
right.
But I think, I've researched this before, and I think we may be able to do one that's more.
I'd like to follow up on that if that's possible.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
Extend the notice
yeah.
requirement for cell
Yeah.
towers.
That could be something for.
Because,
something for a
I
town
mean,
meeting.
it was interesting, because
Yeah.
the very first hearing, nobody showed up.
Right?
Nobody showed up.
There's one gentleman.
We got one person.
Showed up.
It was really
He
in
was brought by
favor.
the, yeah,
What a coincidence.
yeah.
And what comes into play, I believe it's in R1, which is 2-acre lots, and so a lot of that added into the equation.
Right.
So if it was
Yeah.
downtown
Property.
and
So it'd be a
300
little
feet,
bit,
it's going
but
to hit a lot
maybe
more
that's
property.
something we could do as a
I'll
modification.
look into
yeah.
it.
So that's a good point.
Can I ask you a question? We had a couple of emails from citizens who wanted to, pursue doing something different with the wireless utilities in town. How would we as a board pursue that? Would that go to the Board of Selectmen? You know, these
Right, I
type of
mean, I think
emails.
there's
Should be the master
sort of,
Yeah, so
it
we-
could be the
master
master
plans,
plan would be a good
we
way
have
to do it. I mean,
incorporated it.
that's
Yeah.
one that cuts across multiple jurisdictions,
Yeah.
and, it depends. What you gotta find is an advocate. If this person's an advocate and
Yeah.
pushes the issue, all the boards
And
will
comes
get-
before and says, this
Yeah.
is a draft, and this is what I want to do. But I don't even, I read those and I was like, I don't even know how you would implement a new utility. How would you do that?
It'd have to go before a town meeting.
You would have to, it's actually
for
part of.
the
yeah.
expenditures.
Right, right.
To build out the facility and
Or
managing it over.
I mean,
internally,
it's-
we've talked a little about the subdivision rules and regs, that they have to provide proper utilities for water and sewer, and maybe there's some technology where they provide a small monopole, and
Yeah.
screen it within a subdivision. But we have talked about it at the master plan committee, and in the vision and goals, which you'll be hearing about very shortly, we've incorporated not only public utilities, but we've called out including
Yeah.
wireless communication.
I mean, 'cause it's not like it's a bad idea.
No,
I mean, I
it's
think
not.
it
At
would
some
be-
level, it's a good idea.
it's really
I think.
worthy to
I
pursue.
think the approach you're taking is great, to the master plan, yeah.
I'd be
And
interested.
I've also asked our consultant to provide a scope of work to look at the town from a 30,000-foot look and see if he can identify soft spots and where the next application may be coming from. I probably asked a month ago, and we got tied up with this and the holidays, so I did send him a reminder email. So hopefully we'll get that from our consultant, and it might be something we want to pursue just to see, Aaron, I think you brought up Winter Street quite often. Is that going to be the next spot? And so he feels confident that he can look at that view and try to see if there's some undersurfaced area that we should be aware of. So.
Great. Okay, good. So, any other proposed changes? So I think the motion is to approve the written decision as amended and to instruct the planning director to file it within the statutory time frame.
So I have till Wednesday, till Thursday to file it,
Yeah,
so.
so, somebody like to make that motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion.
It's early, we've only been here an hour and 15 minutes,
I
we're
know,
not
it's
warmed
getting
up yet.
I know. I'll make a motion to approve the notice of decision regarding the proposed cell tower wireless special permit, site plan review special permit for 122 Foster Street by Varsity Wireless as amended tonight, and instruct the planner to file that decision by the deadline of Thursday, the 25th.
Okay, good.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Nice job on this, Jim.
Yeah, you did a lot in a short period of time.
Yes.
Thank you.
I had a lot of help. Was fortunate that our consultant could help me.
Yeah. We got anything else?
I don't believe so.
Good.
Sorry, let me get caught up here.
So, yes, go ahead.
Is the,
Hey, could you identify yourself for the record?
yes. My name's Mary DeSalt. I live at 5 Oak Ave. And I wanted to ask, is the public hearing for the Osgood still officially open? And you didn't quite give enough wait time during that period to for comments, or do I have to submit
Oh,
comments
no,
in
that's
writing?
fine, if you'd like to make a comment. I mean, the public hearing's open, we actually took our recommendation, but you're still welcome to make a comment. I just,
Right.
I waited and I thought nobody was ready to speak, so everybody sat there and,
I'm an educator, there, you have to give more wait time for people.
yeah.
So I just wanted to say, I appreciate all the work you guys have done over the months. I have been looking at the meeting minutes. I did not expect the special town meeting to come up, and so I really appreciated your comments, Mr. Boynton, on the fact that your process wasn't rushed, but this special town meeting and the compressed time to offer citizens of the town ample time to weigh the impacts of these articles and the proposed business is a fatal flaw. I think there's reasonable and rational reasons for being on either side of this proposal, and I'd be someone who'd be willing to listen, but I feel like my hand has been forced by the special town meeting where I haven't heard. I've done a lot of research trying to look at the draft regulations from the CCC, and it feels to me like the proposers are using tactics to drive to get their permit. I realize, there's this change in ways of getting permits that's happening as of April 1st. That shouldn't be what drives the discussion among the citizens of North Andover about the impact of this very important decision the town has to make. So I appreciated the discussion tonight, and I really appreciated the very clear articulations of the planning board members who are voting no, because I have to agree with you on this. I feel like if as I read your past minutes over the last few months where you were looking to hold public hearings, you were talking about that all along, but now you had to have 3 of them. I mean, I was away on travel for the last 2. That the timing of our town meeting in May would have been after the state regulations have been made. I feel like there's a lot of things that the decisions that were made at last year's town meeting, you were following up on them. And so I just want to say I think the citizens' petitions that were filed, Articles 1 and 2, are a reaction to the same feeling that I have, that the proposers for the Osgood Landing development pulled a fast one in getting this special town meeting in the dead of winter where there can be less people to vote on it when it's clear that it's more about the adult use cultivation now than it is about medical marijuana, which is a it's a use that many more people are in favor of. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, sure.
Hi. I just have a question. I'm sure there's going to be lots of time for debate next week, so I will sit on my thoughts there. If...
Identify yourself.
Sure, sorry, yeah. I'm Eli Adler-Roth. I live at 114 Beverly. If Article 2 passes, what is the process by which that could be reversed? Or I appreciated the points, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your first name. Eitan. As far as if 4 and 5, I see that it's confusing the way that they're linked. So I'm curious about, if Article 2 passes, that answers the question about 4 and 5. But if Article 2 is a reaction to this specific Osgood proposal, and there's a proposal that came through that felt maybe less rushed or less whatever, it seems like Article 2 would close off the town to that possibility. So can you clarify that for me? How permanent would a pass vote on Article 2 be? Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think there's probably a bunch of ways to answer that. There's a technical way and there's sort of a general way. I mean, I think my view, and I may not be technically tight with this, is that we would just go back to the status quo where we were before, where we are now, actually, as of today. What we would probably then have to do is to put in an article for the regular town meeting that gets us past our moratorium and, potentially, bans the use or puts it in a much smaller size of a project, I think is what we would probably end up doing if that were to come to pass. But Ethan, maybe you can, I think you put a little bit more thought into it than I have.
It's a good question, and it's hard to answer because there's so many different permutations out there of 2 or 4 versus 5. But if nothing passes, I'm really not sure where we're at because we still have a moratorium in place through November. Generally, for a bylaw, you can come back and just create another bylaw. So even if 2 passed, you could come back theoretically with a different bylaw amending that or changing that. That's the general rule. But if a zoning amendment does not pass, which I think was not favorably voted on. There's rules about if it doesn't pass and if it was favorably voted on by the planning board and whether or not it could come back within 2 years and whether it's substantially different. So I don't know.
I think we will know by next week. But I think it's actually, because I read the state law today, I actually read that chapter, 48, I think it's section 8 or something.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because what it says is that if something has come before and doesn't get a favorable recommendation of the planning board, it can't go again.
Right.
But that doesn't preclude us from coming up with an entirely new article, and if we vote in favor of it, it can go with the regular town
But
meeting.
it would have
So
to be substantially different.
That's what we,
Essentially what happened here.
Right.
Yeah.
You voted substantially different, and therefore it's a different
Yeah.
article, and that's why they're
yeah.
allowed to bring it
And
to
that's
town
what
meeting.
we would do, is we would come back with something substantially different and clean it up for the long term. And if the town meeting doesn't approve that, well, we'll just go from there, we'll just do it again.
Within town meeting, though, I mean, it depends on how our moderator handles it and lines them up. But I mean, if something is defeated, it can be reconsidered too. So there are those possibilities too.
Yeah, except that's never happened.
It had
30 years.
I'm with you on that. It would be so unusual.
Yeah.
However, this is a very unusual group
yeah.
of bylaws, and plus so few. I mean, we've only got a handful of issues.
Yeah.
One issue.
Well, I suspect probably what will happen at the town meeting is effectively it'll be one single conversation. But I think what we will do is we will vote on 4 first, I would think. That would be the logic, at least in my mind, would be the logical thing.
Well, see, I would think we'd vote on the
You'd have to ask the
Board
moderator how.
of, yes, the Board of
Yeah.
Selectmen bylaws first, because those are 50%.
50, yeah.
Right, because that could, I think you vote on anything that can end the conversation first, right?
Yeah.
If
Article 1 is.
Article
Yes.
1 says,
Yes.
if you get 50% saying no marijuana in town, then,
Right.
okay, everybody pack up and go home.
Exactly.
So it makes sense to vote on that first, and then, and it's up to the moderator, obviously, but then go to go anything of 50% first, and then go to, I'd probably say 2, and then 4 or 5, but I guess it'll be up to the moderator. I don't know, it'll be,
Yeah.
We'll
But
find
I mean,
out.
I think it'll in the end be one conversation and then.
I think so.
But point well taken, thank you for raising that.
So come to the show.
The gentleman's point, if there's unfavorable action on, well, I'll just speak to the land use 2, 4, and 5, there could be an article, somebody could submit an article, get signatures if it's citizen petition, or the Board of Selectmen could put an article to extend the temporary moratorium. Right now it ends in November. That could happen.
Well, there
It could,
are any
but-
number of permutations, but
But the Attorney General
I do
said they
think
won't allow
that, practically
As I should.
speaking, if none of them pass, we'll just come back and hammer out something that we think is a reasonable compromise at that point, so.
So we have no idea.
Yeah. But we will be prepared next week, so thank you for raising that. So if there's no further discussions, questions.
What time
Yeah.
should we continue the public hearing to?
6 o'clock. I think we should do it at 6 o'clock.
And where is that?
The athletics office at the high school.
Where's that?
In the high school.
You know where the gym is?
I know where the gym is,
So
yeah.
when you turn to go to the gym, on the right, there's a door, and you
Okay.
just walk in
It's
that
pretty
way.
well marked
You'll
when
see,
you go. You'll
the
see.
room has all kinds of plaques and things on the wall. Looks like an
okay.
athletic
If
office.
you walk in and go, oh,
And
somebody will say.
There's people there to show you. So 6 o'clock on January 30th, the public hearing is continued.
Yeah, okay. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.